The Apollo 11 mission remains a pinnacle in human achievement. It's forever remembered as the historic journey that took humans to the moon. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, brave pioneers, were the first to set foot on the lunar surface. Yet often in the shadows is astronaut Michael Collins, who played a vital role in this mission. Now, Collins steps forward to share some mysterious experiences from the lunar expedition. In this video, we'll explore the astonishing lunar revelations Michael Collins shares about their moon journey.
He also left something of Muffy's on the moon. I know what it is, but I have never shared that with anyone.
Number 20. The genesis of Apollo 11. In the 1960s, President John F. Kennedy inspired the nation with impassioned speeches about sending a man to the moon. Yet, hidden recordings later revealed that his enthusiasm for space was less about exploration and more about surpassing the Soviets. During a 1962 session with key advisors and NASA chiefs, JFK candidly remarked, "I'm not deeply invested in space." For Kennedy, it wasn't the cosmos that fascinated him, but the potential for political victory. His urgency was fueled when, in April 1961, just months into his term, Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human in space. This Soviet achievement heightened Kennedy's desire for an American triumph. He looked to Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson, a staunch advocate for space exploration. Johnson, leading a revamped Space Council, posited that a manned moon mission was a surefire way to showcase U.S. supremacy. This pivotal suggestion set the stage for the conception of the Apollo 11 mission. Number 19. Securing their legacy. For the Apollo 11 crew, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins, the threat of not returning was real. Just 2 years prior, an Apollo 1 launch rehearsal ended in a devastating fire, taking the crew's lives, underscoring the inherent risks. While NASA had insurance, it didn't extend to astronauts during flights due to the experimental and risky nature of the missions. Essentially, during the most hazardous parts, the astronauts lacked agency-backed insurance. With families to think about, they sought a way to provide for their loved ones should the worst happen. Leveraging their newfound celebrity, each astronaut signed a myriad of envelopes, each with a distinct design marking the mission and a stamp from a prior Apollo feat. The goal? To have these envelopes stamped either on launch or moon landing day, increasing their worth as memorabilia. If tragedy struck, these insurance covers could be sold by their families to support them. Number 18. Readying the crew tasked with the monumental job of sending humans to the moon, NASA set about designing simulations to mirror lunar conditions. Think about gravity. The moon's pull is just a sixth of Earth's. To mimic this, scientists at NASA's Langley Research Center in Hampton, Virginia had subjects angled and suspended, allowing them to walk on tilted surfaces. This innovative approach gave deep insights into how reduced gravity might influence astronauts' movement, from walking to jumping. However, before embracing the moon's subtle gravity, landing there was crucial. A partnership with Bell Aerosystems birthed the Lunar Landing Research Vehicle and later, the Lunar Landing Training Vehicle. The Apollo 11 team trained with these in Houston, Texas. These crafts imitated lunar gravity using a turbofan engine that bore 83.3% of the vehicle's weight. Neil Armstrong, Apollo 11's commander, credited much of the mission's success to these exacting simulations. Further, in a theatrical move, NASA and the U.S. Geological Survey sculpted craters in Cinder Lake, Arizona, trying to mirror the moon's rugged terrain. Number 17. The Heart of Apollo 11. Columbia. The Columbia, the Apollo 11 command module, functioned as the living space for the trio during their landmark moon voyage. Remarkably, the module's interior was just about as roomy as a sizable car. On July 16, 1969, Neil Armstrong, Edwin Aldrin, and Michael Collins embarked on their expedition from Cape Kennedy via the Saturn V rocket. Constructed by North American Rockwell, the command module, designated 107, was one of three primary components of the Apollo spacecraft. Accompanying it was the service module, equipped with the main propulsion and crucial provisions. The third component, The lunar module, affectionately termed Eagle, was Armstrong and Aldrin's vessel to the lunar surface on July 20th. While Eagle stayed on the moon, only the command module made the journey back to Earth. After a celebratory tour across American cities in 1971, the module found its permanent residence at the Smithsonian Institution, the globe's premier museum and research hub. It's now celebrated as a pivotal flight relic within the institution. Number 16. The pioneering broadcast NASA grappled with the decision to incorporate a TV camera within the Apollo 11's lunar module due to weight concerns. Ultimately, they sanctioned a black-and-white Westinghouse camera boasting a 16mm lens. Broadcasting to Earth became an ancillary goal. As Armstrong stepped onto the lunar module's ledge, he unveiled a storage unit linked to the module's base, which housed the camera. Uniquely designed, this camera could manage the moon's sharp contrast of light and shade. Signal transmission involved a featherweight antenna perched on the module, looking akin to an umbrella. This antenna, enveloped in 38 miles of fine, gold-plated wire thinner than human hair, bounced the signal a staggering 250,000 miles back to our planet. Inside, Aldrin powered a switch, transmitting fuzzy TV footage of Armstrong to Earth. Despite the imperfect visuals, this was a broadcasting landmark. The Apollo 11 broadcast captivated between 650 million viewers worldwide, watching Armstrong and Aldrin on the moon on July 20, 1969. Even in Europe, many stayed up late to witness this spectacle. To date, this moon landing remains among the top-viewed TV broadcasts. Number 15. Moon's Sacred Moment. Upon the historic touchdown of Apollo 11's Eagle on the lunar surface, astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin were met with a protocol-induced wait before the epic-making moonwalk. During this pause, Aldrin embarked on an unparalleled gesture. He conducted the first Christian sacrament on the moon, communion. Aldrin, an elder at Webster Presbyterian Church, had previously obtained special permission to take bread and wine for the sacred ritual to space. Once Eagle safely landed, Aldrin unveiled a wafer and wine, paired with a small silver chalice, courtesy of his church, stored in his personal kit. He then broadcast to the ground team, urging a moment of reflection and gratitude in their own manner. Quietly, Aldrin read aloud from John 15:5, a scripture he'd penned on a note card. He then took communion, while Armstrong respectfully remained a silent observer, choosing not to partake. Though Aldrin wished for the global audience to partake in this holy moment, its broadcast was hindered. Atheist activist Madalyn Murray O'Hair, renowned for championing church-state separation, indirectly affected the decision not to broadcast the sacred rite. Number 14. Protest at the launch. While the Apollo 11 mission garnered widespread enthusiasm, there were detractors. Just days before the anticipated launch, a group of activists, with civil rights leader Ralph Abernathy at the helm, gathered at the Kennedy Space Center's entrance. To underscore the disparity between the towering Saturn V rocket and America's impoverished families, they showcased 2 mules and a simple wooden cart. Amid the build-up to launch, Thomas Paine, the NASA chief, opted to address the demonstrators head-on. Despite a drizzle, Paine and Abernathy delved into dialogue. Abernathy outlined 3 demands: the inclusion of 10 families from his contingent to observe the launch, NASA's commitment to initiatives combating U.S. poverty and societal woes, and NASA professionals' involvement in addressing hunger. Paine, in turn, articulated his wish for Abernathy's movement to see space exploration as a driver, spurring the country to address diverse challenges fearlessly. He pictured space accomplishments as a yardstick, gauging progress in multiple areas. Conceding to one of the demands, Paine ensured the protesters had a prime vantage point during the liftoff in a VIP section. Recognizing the astronauts' feat, Abernathy offered prayers for their well-being and voiced his admiration. Number 13. Concerns of explosion. The Saturn V remains unparalleled as the mightiest rocket ever crafted by the U.S. This leviathan of a launcher exerted an astonishing 33 million newtons of thrust at launch, with a reservoir of 2.5 million kilograms of propellant. Yet, this immense machine wasn't devoid of peril. The 1968 Apollo 6 test saw the Saturn V nearing self-destruction, highlighting the imminent risk of an eruptive calamity at the launch site. NASA had already sounded the alarm in 1965. Studies at what's now the Johnson Space Center deduced the ruinous fallout of a fully loaded Saturn V detonation. Such a blast could parallel the force of a minor nuclear weapon, about half the strength of the Hiroshima bomb. Imagine a blazing sphere spanning 1,000 feet across, with heat intensifying up to 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit. Debris from this catastrophe could scatter to distances nearing 3 miles. With these risks in mind, NASA took no chances during Apollo 11's ascent. VIP figures like Vice President Spiro Agnew and ex-President Lyndon Johnson were tactically seated 3.5 miles from the launch point, guarding against any unplanned detonation. Number 12. Michael's orbit. Amid the fanfare of the 1969 lunar landing, Michael Collins often stands eclipsed beside the luminance of Armstrong and Aldrin. Spanning a voyage of 238,000 miles to the moon, Collins never imprinted its dusty surface. He held the helm of the command module throughout the mission's duration, as his comrades Armstrong and Aldrin ventured to the moon's expanse aboard the lunar lander Eagle. For a stretch of 28 hours, Collins singularly manned the command module Columbia as his partners undertook their lunar exploits. Upon their ascent, Collins faced the paramount challenge of merging the two vessels, an imperative for their earthward journey. Had circumstances turned awry, leaving Armstrong and Aldrin stranded, Collins' homeward voyage would have been a solitary one. However, when questioned about any regrets of not landing, Collins showcased contentment in his assignment, likening his role to a base camp manager during a mountaineering expedition. Notably, during the mission, Collins seized a poignant moment, photographing Armstrong and Aldrin aboard Eagle, with our planet looming in the distance. Reflecting on this image, many discerned an intriguing fact. The photograph held every human, past and present, barring Michael Collins himself. Number 11. Moon touchdown. As Armstrong and Aldrin began their descent towards the moon, they were unaware of a slight change in plan. Earlier, when the lunar module, Eagle, detached from Columbia, the command module, a leftover pressure push, sent them slightly off course. About 9 minutes before landing, Armstrong noticed they were about 3 miles away from the intended flat landing area, necessitating a quick change of plans. Adding to the complexity, the Eagle's computer sent out alarms during their approach, and their communication with mission control was inconsistent. These alarms, due to the computer being potentially overloaded, were a cause for concern. However, mission control assessed the situation and decided it was safe to proceed. As they approached the moon, another challenge appeared. They were burning fuel faster than expected. With their original landing spot no longer an option and fuel dwindling, quick decisions were vital. Just when the situation seemed dire, with only about 30 seconds of fuel left, Armstrong skillfully landed the Eagle in a new location. This spot would be named Tranquility Base, marking humanity's first steps on the moon. Number 10. Fuel issue on the moon. After landing and the initial excitement settling down, a hidden problem started emerging. Sensors detected a pressure buildup in the landing engine's fuel line, which wasn't supposed to happen. The reason soon became evident. There was ice in the fuel line, blocking it. Because the engine was still warm, this ice was causing the trapped fuel vapor to heat up, which could become a serious problem. NASA and Grumman, the company that made the lunar module, realized the severity of this situation. If they didn't act, there was a risk of the fuel exploding. Aerospace engineer Thomas J. Kelly mentioned in his 2001 book, Moonlander, that everyone agreed, leaving even a small amount of fuel trapped could lead to unpredictable and potentially catastrophic results. Although they made plans to vent the fuel system, they didn't have to implement them. Luckily, before any steps were taken, the ice melted, releasing the trapped gas and solving the problem on its own. Number 9. The unseen crew member. Everyone knows about the famous trio of the Apollo 11 mission: Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. However, there was a fourth unseen member on board, the Apollo Guidance Computer, AGC. This was a top-tier computer for its era, even though it was the size of a large mobile phone today. It weighed about 70 pounds and ran on 70 watts. Unlike today's plug-and-play systems, the AGC's software was intricately woven by hand directly into the machine. The astronauts interacted with it through a unit called the DSKI, display and keyboard. When they input commands, the computer would use terms like prog, verb, and noun. To make it work, astronauts had to memorize the numbers associated with each term. To give an idea of its capability, the AGC could process 40,000 instructions every second. That might sound a lot, but today's computers can handle billions in the same time. There were 2 AGCs on the Apollo 11 Mission 1 in the command module, and another in the lunar module. Today's everyday devices like laptops and even light bulbs have more computing power than the AGC. But considering its time, it was a technological marvel. It played a pivotal role in the mission's success and paved the way for the tech advances we enjoy today. Number 8. Moon's Mirror. While Neil Armstrong's footprint on the moon is iconic and celebrated worldwide, it's not the only significant artifact left behind. Along with the famous American flag, the astronauts placed a special panel filled with mirrors on the moon's surface. Known as the lunar laser retroreflectors, this panel is about 2 feet wide and was placed there by Armstrong and Aldrin on their historic moonwalk in 1969. This mirror panel wasn't just for show. It was one of 5 such devices sent to the moon during the Apollo missions. Scientists on Earth used these reflectors to shoot laser beams at the moon. When the beams bounce back, they give accurate measurements of the distance between the Earth and the moon. These measurements help us learn about the moon's orbit and test theories about gravity. This mirror technology has even influenced our daily lives. The success of these lunar reflectors paved the way for satellite technologies like GPS, which many of us rely on today. Number 7. Moon's Mystery Dust. During the Apollo 11 mission, one big question lingered. What was the moon's surface like? Would the lunar lander settle on firm ground or sink into soft terrain? Thankfully, the ground was solid, but the moon had other surprises. Upon returning to the lunar lander, Armstrong and Aldrin noticed an unusual odor from the moon dust on their suits and equipment. Aldrin described it as a scent similar to wet fireplace ashes or burnt charcoal. Before their journey, there were fears about this moon dust. Some believed it could be hazardous and might even catch fire when exposed to oxygen. Since the dust had never been in contact with oxygen before, there was concern about what might happen when the lunar module was repressurized with air. To test this, Aldrin and Armstrong performed a quick experiment. Using a sample Armstrong had tucked into his pocket, they watched to see if the dust would react when exposed to air. Fortunately, nothing happened, and they continued their preparations to leave the moon. Back on Earth, scientists hoped to study the mysterious smell of the moon dust. But when the sealed samples were opened, the unique odor was gone, leaving the scent's cause a lunar mystery. Number 6. Armstrong's Secret Journey. While on the moon, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin had a tight schedule for their short 2.5-hour moonwalk. They were gathering samples and capturing their unique environment. But something unplanned happened. Armstrong took an unexpected side trip. Leaving the set path, he wandered towards a spot called Little West Crater. For about 3 minutes, no one on Earth or even Aldrin knew what he was up to. This brief detour saw Armstrong out of contact, and in that short span, he took only 9 photos. But there's a bigger mystery. Rumors fueled by the 2018 movie First Man suggest that Armstrong might have left a personal memento near the crater. Some believe it was a bracelet that once belonged to his daughter Karen, who had sadly died at just 2 years old, long before his lunar journey. But the truth? Only Armstrong knew, and he never shared it.
He also left something of Muffy's on the moon. I know what it is, but I have never shared that with anyone.
On to our featured image. This photo showcases a peculiar ringed structure on the moon, with odd lights shining from specific points. What could it be? We're keen to hear your ideas, so let us know in the comments below. Number 5. Penn to the rescue. After landing on the moon, Armstrong and Aldrin were gearing up for their monumental moonwalk, but they faced a hitch. While adjusting their equipment, they inadvertently broke the tip of a vital circuit breaker. This wasn't just any breaker, it powered the engine they needed to leave the moon. With this broken, they were potentially stranded. Quickly informing Mission Control, they stepped out for their moonwalk while solutions were sought back on Earth. Yet, despite the technology at NASA's disposal, no straightforward answer was found. The astronauts, however, were seasoned problem solvers. Back in the lunar module, Aldrin, with his engineering background, sized up the problem. He recognized that if he could just push the circuit breaker from the inside, they'd be set. After some thought, he used a soft-tipped marker as an impromptu tool. With a simple push, Aldrin managed to close the circuit. Thanks to his quick thinking, the day was saved. Number 4. Preemptive words. President Kennedy had once rallied the nation with the dream of landing a man on the moon. Though he tragically never lived to see it materialize, the Apollo mission surged ahead, and the mantle of realizing this vision passed on to President Richard Nixon by 1968. As Armstrong and Aldrin set foot on the moon, Nixon was fraught with anxiety, not just about the historic event, but the potential for something to go awry. The consequences of failure were high, given the vast resources invested and the lives at stake. Bracing for the worst, Nixon's aides had drafted a speech for him to address the world in case of a disaster. This speech, to be delivered after offering condolences to the astronauts' families, was fortunately never needed. They had even made provisions for a priest to conduct a service for the lost astronauts. As Nixon watched the historic Apollo 11 landing, he prayed he wouldn't have to deliver those sorrowful words. His prayers were answered. The mission succeeded without a hitch, marking the beginning of several successful lunar missions. Between 1969 and 1972, the U.S. sent 12 astronauts to the moon, all returning safely. Number 3. Post-mission isolation. After their historic lunar mission, Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins faced an unexpected twist. Their first stop back on Earth wasn't a hero's welcome, but a quarantine chamber. Given that no human had ever set foot on the moon before, NASA's precaution was to ensure no unknown lunar pathogens were introduced to Earth. When the Apollo 11 command module, Columbia, touched down southwest of Honolulu, U.S. Navy divers, dressed in biohazard suits, were on the scene. They sanitized the hatch with iodine and handed the astronauts special suits called biological isolation garments. Not taking any risks, both astronauts and their module received a bleach treatment. The next stop was an aircraft carrier, but not for a celebration. Instead, they were directed into a mobile isolation unit. This unique vehicle transported them to NASA's Johnson Space Center, where a more spacious quarantine facility awaited. Their confinement lasted until August 10, 1969. Soon after their release, the streets of New York witnessed a grand ticker tape parade in their honor. The following weeks were filled with events, accolades, and recognition for their momentous achievement. Number 2. Spacesuit Saga, the lingerie connection. Who would have imagined a lingerie brand at the forefront of space exploration? Yet that's exactly the role Playtex, a prominent French lingerie brand, assumed when NASA sought them out for crafting spacesuits for astronauts. The task? Ensure the astronauts are shielded from the moon's unforgiving conditions. But it wasn't a straightforward assignment. Complications arose when NASA insisted on merging Playtex's expertise with the aerospace titan, Hamilton Standard. Hamilton discarded Playtex's original design, attempting to forge their own path, but faced rejection from NASA. Seeking alternatives, NASA turned the spacesuit creation into an open contest, allowing various competitors to submit designs. Here's where the plot thickens. Playtex employees, in a daring move, reclaimed their original design from Hamilton's offices and presented it back to NASA. The result? Playtex's subsidiary, ILC Dover in Delaware, became NASA's go-to for spacesuits. It's a testament to the unexpected yet pivotal roles companies can play in groundbreaking events. Number 1. The unsung hero, Katherine Johnson. While the Apollo 11 crew etched their names into the annals of history, another key figure remained largely in the shadows. Katherine Johnson, an exceptionally talented black woman, played a pivotal role in the Apollo 11 mission. Within NASA's corridors, Johnson and a group of dedicated women were known as human computers, responsible for critical calculations. Johnson's precise mathematical insights laid the foundation for the mission's success, guiding the astronauts safely to the moon and back. Among her major contributions, she worked out the flight trajectories and ensured the lunar landers synced with the command module. However, her challenges weren't just mathematical. In the era of the 1950s and 60s, she defied racial and gender biases to shine in a predominantly male-driven NASA environment. Johnson's story, along with other brilliant women at NASA, got the spotlight in the book and film Hidden Figures. In 2015, President Barack Obama recognized her monumental contributions by bestowing her with the Presidential Medal of Freedom. 2 years later, NASA celebrated her by naming the Katherine G. Johnson Computational Research Facility at their Langley Research Center in Hampton, Virginia. Her story is a testament to talent, perseverance, and breaking barriers.